All right, everybody. You are listening to Connecting to Pack, and this is your host, Abdullah Najjar. In today's conversation, I'm going to be talking to Goga Katalandze. And Goga is a student from Georgia, not Atlanta, Georgia, but Georgia, the country. And he is currently a student here at NC State University, pursuing a master's degree in international studies. Today we'll try to talk about his journey here in the United States as part of NC State University's MIS program, Masters of International Studies, and we'll also try to talk about some of his experiences in Georgia. And without further ado, Goga, welcome to the studio.
Well, thank you very much for having me and for the opportunity to share my story. And yeah, I kind of liked your joke about Atlanta, Georgia. It should be put forward.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Goga, and as you mentioned, I'm studying international relations, international studies with a focus in international development. I was born in Western Georgia, which is Abkhazia, Georgia.
Okay.
And
Not Atlanta, Georgia.
no, definitely.
Okay.
It's far away from Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. We said Western Georgia.
It's the western part of Georgia called Abkhazia. It's a big kind of region of Georgia. So I was born closer to the border with the rest of the Georgia. It's kind of occupied, so it's occupied by Russia. So, yeah.
So you, I like that you specified exactly where you were born and what the kind of a situation is like in a way where it doesn't have full autonomy, the region that you're part of. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yes.
Okay.
It does not internationally.
Okay.
It's a self-proclaimed state.
Uh-huh.
So there is like a long history behind Abkhazia and South Ossetia, which is northern Georgia. So both of those territories are occupied by Russia currently. So we say like 20% of Georgia is occupied by Russia. So it all started at the beginning of 90s in 92 with the collapse of Soviet Union, and there was a tension between different ethnic minorities of Georgia, specifically Ossetians and Abkhazians. So there was a civil war that lasted for more than 1 year. And, Russia kind of saw this whole situation unfolding, and they kind of intervened in the civil war, which resulted in the loss of the civil war by the central Georgian government. And Abkhazians declared the independence from the rest of the Georgia. And then, after decades later, in 2008, similar situation happened with Ossetians, South Ossetia, which is the northern Georgia, and Russia kind of invaded Georgia in 2008 and officially occupied both territories. So
wow. And how old were you in 2008 when the invasion happened?
So I was 10 years old, but I don't really remember a lot about the whole war situation, because again, South Ossetia is a little bit far from Abkhazia. But I remember my family was packing up stuff to just not leave Georgia, but we were kind of moving to the mountainous area of Georgia because we were afraid that it would be a full-scale invasion into Georgia, like to annihilate, like to occupy the whole country, which was the intention of Medvedev at that time. But there were some pretty serious warnings sent by the United States and the Bush government at that time, and they kind of backed up and they were satisfied with just the occupation.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
And do you remember how long you guys stayed in the mountains? Like how?
We stayed there for a couple of months, even though the war itself lasted only 5 days. There is even a very interesting documentary on Netflix called 5 Days of August. That's when the invasion was, and it's filmed by like Hollywood. It was 5 days, but it was a heinous crime, against Georgians and generally, I think, against humanity whenever
Right.
another country declares war. So it was tough, and I had friends who actually lived in northern part of Georgia in South Ossetia who actually witnessed the horrors of the war. So yeah.
Wow. I'm sorry about your friends, and I'm glad that you didn't experience something similar. Let's say.
Yeah. I
But
was kind of out of the out of the whole situation. But as a kid, you kind of still, 10-year-old person is still trying to figure out everything in life. So for me, it was like I didn't realize what was going on. I knew it was a war, but it's just frightening anyway.
Yeah.
Like it still follows you your entire life. The sense of kind of insecurity and not feeling safe. And after the war, I still remained in Abkhazia until I graduated from high school. So it was difficult.
And that would be an occupied territory.
Yes.
Wow.
So I was going to school in Abkhazia, which declared itself as independent state. So they kind of already hated Georgians. So there was hatred, there was discrimination. We were not allowed to speak Georgian at school.
Oh.
I kind of got my education of high school fully like in Russian. So,
In Russian.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So you as a Georgian who spoke Georgian, I would probably guess before high school.
I knew a little bit of Georgian, but I don't want to confuse your audience because it's a small country, but it has so many ethnic minorities and languages spoken. So my family is considered Migrelian as an ethnic, if we describe them ethnically. So we kind of speak Migrelian, which is a language that doesn't have alphabet, but it's a spoken language.
Oh.
So that's the language we spoke in my family. So I did not have much access to the Georgian language itself other than the TV. So my Georgian was pretty bad. But I was taught Georgian at school, but as a foreign language.
Oh, wow.
Just once a week, which is not enough to kind of learn the language.
And so primarily you would probably say that you're more proficient in Russian than you are in Georgian.
It is funny you say because I was recently trying to talk in Russian with some of the Russian Fulbright students here at NC State and some other students. I think I'm kind of losing it a little bit because I haven't spoken Russian for a very long time because there is also, Georgians don't really like the whole political situation with Russia. So people boycott it in different ways, like not speaking the language or like, and I don't have any problems with the language. I'm actually very happy I speak and understand Russian, but you lose it because it's not like I spoke Russian since I was born. I did not. I mean, it's just I went to school and I was forced to learn history, math, and geography, biology, everything in Russian.
Wow.
So I was good at it, and I think I'm still, but like it's been more than 6 years, I would say, that I was not having full conversations in Russian.
So let me break it down here a little bit just so that I could make sure that I understand it.
Yeah, sure.
Throughout high school, you were learning Russian. The subjects were in Russian.
Yes, everything was in Russian.
And then after you graduate, you move out.
Yeah, I leave the area. I leave the occupied part. I go to the central government of Georgia, like
Yeah.
the territory which is controlled by the government of Georgia. So I moved to the capital city called Tbilisi, and I got admitted to the Tbilisi State University, which is shocking because it's one of the top universities in South Caucasus, like
Yeah.
which involves Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. So I was really excited and happy I got admitted to that university,
Wow.
and I was studying political science in my undergrad and in Georgian.
In Georgian. Okay, so
Yeah.
that must have been a huge transition.
Yeah, it was
to-
a huge transition, but there are people behind all that success. At my 7th grade of high school, since Georgian was taught as a foreign language, my Georgian language teacher offered me some extra classes, but we did not declare it publicly because she might get in trouble for giving extra classes in Georgian, and I would get in trouble for trying to attempt to learn the language.
Oh,
So I used to go to her house every now and then, and it's like, she would have books of Georgian literature, and she would ask me to like read and memorize, and we used to play like a theatric play of different Georgian novels, and I really learned a very good amount of Georgian. I even impressed so many people at my university when I was in undergrad with the level of knowledge I had, and I didn't even have any like an accent or anything. I was like, it looked like I grew up in the capital city.
that's insane because
Yeah.
you are actually from Georgia, but you were learning the language in secret.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
Like sometimes I feel like I should sit down and write a book about it, but
Right.
yeah,
No, this is very fascinating. I mean, you go through high school and you're learning Russian, then you jump, you graduate, you go to college,
Mm.
you're now going back to your roots and sort of learning the subjects are being taught in Georgian.
Mhm.
And did you ever, when you encounter, when you have different encounters with different people, would you reveal that part of your life, or was it always kept under wraps?
So I actually consider myself a little bit humble person. I don't really talk much about myself unless someone really asks me about my life. And then I'm like, there is a very good story behind me. I mean, I should be speaking about it. Yes, I would actually like, when people would ask me where you're from, like Georgians ask you, like, I would say Abkhazia. And then Georgians get curious because they do not have the access to the Abkhazian territory. And they are interested what is going on there after the civil war.
Yeah.
So then I would say a little bit, but many of those people wouldn't really know about my journey with the Georgian language, my journey with being a little bit humiliated of being Georgian, or and same goes to the English language. So it was I wouldn't really touch on those things, but I would discuss it with people I would get close to. So.
Yeah. So you spent 4 years in the capital, Tbilisi, I think they said.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So 4 years there. How would you characterize those 4 years? I mean, it must have been life-changing in a way, right?
Yeah, it was life-changing. So people are different, but in my undergrad at Tbilisi State University, there were some people who, people born in the capital city. Sometimes when they look at the students who come from other parts of Georgia, from regional parts, there is a stereotype that we don't have the same level of professionalism or whatever, the access to the resources, etc. So they look at you a little bit like down or whatever. They're like, oh, well. And honestly, not only my friends, but even my mom, when I was applying for Tbilisi State University, my mom was like, just apply for a smaller university because, people there might be too fancy or too bougie for you. And she was scared because growing up, I was a pretty shy person. So she was afraid that I would be lost. But the first year was tough. But after first year, I actually picked up on many things. And I was one of the top students at the Tbilisi State University. I graduated with honors. So,
wow. No,
yeah.
Congratulations. That
Yeah.
is such a huge mean, a huge
Yeah,
milestone.
I know.
Yeah.
I did not expect that, but I really worked hard. I worked hard not only just for myself, but for my family and for the region I was coming from,
Yeah.
just to prove the point that yeah, I might not have access to computer, to books, to modern resources as you guys had, because I was in the isolated town, but I still made it.
Right.
So yeah, I guess that was the whole point of me spending nights on reading and studying and everything. So
That is incredible. I
yeah,
mean, I couldn't even imagine what it must have been like to be in some, in isolation, if I could characterize it as such,
yeah,
and then transition into a huge city with different maybe culture, obviously different way of speaking, and
hmm
just and being on your own. I'm sure your family didn't even transition with you, right? You were
No, my mom still lives in Abkhazia.
wow.
She's still there. Yeah, because everyone is there, all my family members. It's only me and my sister who moved to Tbilisi. Again, because I could stay in Abkhazia. And there is another story of like, so it's just, if I stayed in Abkhazia as a Georgian, I would not be able to find any job that I would want to pursue because I am Georgian. I would never be given a higher tier job. Like I would never get a
Oh,
good job. Um, but despite me being Georgian, I always had respect to Abkhazians because Georgians made some mistakes too, and Abkhazians made some mistakes too. So I still had respect to them throughout the high school. I was trying to learn Abkhazian and Abkhazian language. Um, and despite being Georgian, I still graduated the high school also with honors.
wow.
Um, and
Congrats.
they kind of wanted me to like stay in Abkhazia. So they offered me a scholarship to go to Moscow State University and to study there and then come back to Abkhazia and kind of work for Abkhazia.
Uh-huh.
But if I have done that, that is kind of a betrayal to Georgians. So that is why I didn't stay in Abkhazia and my sister didn't stay. So we moved to Tbilisi, but all my family members stayed in Abkhazia.
Wow. And you know, and none of the things we discussed so far, and none of these things did you mention English language and where you learned how to speak English. Because
Yeah.
this is like, how did that even happen? Like, what's the story?
There is a very I will be brief about this, but so I was always kind of interested in English language, and one of the reasons is that when countries are occupied, isolated in a conflict situation, the United Nations is the one that kind of enters
Mm-hmm.
into those territories or tries to negotiate
Yeah.
whatever terms between the parties. So as a kid, I remember there were a lot of UN cars moving around the town. So I got curious about the English language, but again, I didn't have access to the resources. I was learning English at school, but English was taught more as a science than as a language. Okay,
Oh.
every single grammar rule would be described in Russian to me, and I would be like, okay, that makes sense, but like we would never practice to speak English.
Huh.
So I used to like collect some random books because of the civil war and everything. There were a lot of abandoned houses, and there were some books that survived the whole conflict.
Yeah.
And there were very old Soviet Union English books that I used to collect and bring them home. And then I used to memorize. I used to memorize everything, like the text. If I heard anything, someone speaking, I would practice it like over and over again. And then I needed people to talk to in English, but
Yeah.
there were not many people who in Abkhazia I could do that, except UN. So
Wow.
what I would do is that I would go sometimes alone, sometimes with my grandmother, because I was still a kid and I was shy, as I said.
Yeah.
So she would help me to like go to the UN houses, and we would just knock on the door, and then I would just ask if anyone would want to speak with me in English. And honestly, I never received any like no's. Everyone was open, and I practiced a lot. And then during my last year in high school, one of the UN agencies actually hired me as a translator from
Whoa.
English to Russian for someone from Spain they hired to do some research in Abkhazia. So yeah, that's my English language
Gosh.
journey.
That's way more
Oh my god, I just
exciting.
realized how my life is. I don't know. It's
No, this is way more
uh,
exciting than how I learned English or even
yeah.
whatever upbringing I had. Like
I
this
would be
is
really curious about your because you have a very very good pronunciation in English. So
I probably wouldn't characterize it that, but I mean,
no,
so
trust me.
well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, my story is just that, it's very, very kind of simple in a way where I just exposed myself to movies in Hollywood at an early
Hmm.
age,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I just I would mimic everything I hear,
yeah,
and so
yeah.
over the years,
Yeah,
my English evolved.
but that's similar to mine. I mean, mimicking and learning and writing down. Later when I got computer and access to internet after leaving Georgia, that's how I practiced more and more.
Yeah.
Watching movies, listening to songs, and memorizing lyrics. All of those things. So
Wow.
that's still exciting. But I knew that I wouldn't survive in the capital city during my undergrad if I didn't pick up English because my dream was to go abroad.
Oh, so
And
you had that dream from
yes,
okay, when did that become like well, it became a reality when you showed up here obviously, but
yeah.
when did you first start dreaming about it? Maybe that's a
I was
question.
dreaming about going abroad since I was a kid.
Wow.
I always wanted to see the other side of the world. I guess when you are isolated, you are kind of like a curious kid. Like, what is happening out there? Um, so my first ever travel was like a 2-week conference. It was about like peace building and conflict resolution. I mean, I was coming from a town like the area that was conflict affected, so I was interested in like conflict resolutions, peaceful dialogues. So I went to during my undergrad. That's where all my travel journey started. The first country was France. That's where I went,
Yeah.
and it was very very difficult for me because I
Wow.
saw so many like international students, professionals, and it was a training, and I loved it. I was there, and I made so many friends, and with most of them I'm still in touch. One of them is even my best friend. So I loved it so much that I was like, okay, I will keep traveling. There are scholarships, grants, trainings I could apply for.
Yeah.
And since Georgia geographically is considered Europe, even though people try to argue, no, it's Asia, whatever, but it's considered Europe. The European Commission would provide a lot of full scholarships that I would keep applying for. Um, and with those scholarships, like I went to other countries like Armenia, Germany, Turkey, so like many, many other countries. But all of this was like a short-term trainings.
Yeah.
But it would help me with my English and it would help me with my skills. So what I did is I wanted something long-term. And my dream country was the United States.
Hooray.
Yeah. Even my high school graduation, we have a tradition to wear a shirt and print something that resonates with our personality.
Uh-huh.
And what I had in my shirt was the United States flag, which is funny because, in Abkhazia, which is occupied by Russia, people don't really like the whole idea behind the United States. And I'm like, I realized it later why I did that. But, I just recently found that picture of me with the American flag.
Oh my.
But,
That's funny.
to come to the United States, it's not easy. Like most of the programs have a lot of requirements. Like you can't just be like, oh, I'm a student with a 4.0 GPA. Like that doesn't matter. Like you have to do something other than studying, like
Mhm.
being involved in activities. So that's why I was traveling so much. And doing projects and working for nonprofits as a volunteer to be like, yeah, I can do something other than just being a nerd, whatever. So the first program that I wanted to apply to was the UGrad program, which is sponsored by the U.S. State Department. It's an exchange program for the undergrads. to go to the United States for a semester.
Oh, wow.
I applied for it. I got into the interview stage, and then I received rejection.
Oh, gosh.
And I was very, very disappointed. But I also knew that my English wasn't good enough. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I didn't have enough to show for, because so many people apply for that scholarship. So I had to stand out somehow. So I started preparing myself for the next, next route when they would announce it. But at that time, when I was already applying for the new, the road of this UGRAD program, I was in Armenia, Yerevan, attending a training for a week. And I'm filling out the application, and I suddenly receive an email from the U.S. Embassy in Georgia saying, we received an extra funding from the State Department. Would you like to go to the United States?
Whoa.
And I was like, what? It was shocking to me because, I already gave up. It's like a new application. They are accepting new applications. And I'm like, yes. Honestly, when I received that email, I was so shocked that I clicked on archive the email or something, and the email just disappeared. And I was like, was it just a dream, an illusion? Whatever. Then I just found it. But I received that email in late November, and they wanted me to be in the United States by the beginning of January.
Whoa.
So I had to pass the TOEFL test. That was the only requirement, actually. But we did it. I made it. I was studying. I went to the U.S. and I was in Detroit, Michigan. I was studying at Wayne State University for a semester.
Interesting.
And it was really, really great to be there and to get the sense of kind of the taste of the American education. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed Detroit. As a side note, I think it's a pretty underrated place. It was really, really cool to be there. I made so many friends. And while being there, I applied for the Erasmus program, which is a European Commission program between kind of European countries to exchange students. So that's also for one semester. And I applied. I got accepted. And after the United States, I went to Dublin, Ireland, and I was studying at the University College Dublin for another semester. So
that's a great university.
Yeah. So, that's how I made it to the long-term things. But it was, it was all building up my life for something bigger.
Yeah.
Which I am part of right now.
And this would be the Fulbright program. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Wow. So you went through all of these different experiences, and now we're at the stage of you being part of the prestigious Fulbright program.
Yeah.
How did that start? The application and the interest in the program.
So I came from all these programs. I still kept going to conferences and trainings and doing some voluntary activities for nonprofits. I graduated from the Tbilisi State University, and then I started to work because I kind of wanted some professional experience as well. So I was working for the FAO UN, which is a food and agriculture organization, and I was assigned the portfolio for Abkhazia, and I was really excited to work for my region, for my people, and I was working for them for almost 2 years.
Wow.
And honestly, I wanted to work for them for a little bit longer, so the Fulbright thing was delayed by me. But my friends decided otherwise. They were like, oh no, you should try. You should try it now because the application process takes almost 1 year. So I listened to them, but again, I didn't have much hopes because it is pretty competitive. You really need to have a research vision. You really need to have a good, everything. You need to be really good. And I know so many Georgians who apply for that, and many of them are really amazing, in their field. And I don't know. Sometimes I just felt like I was underestimating myself. I'm like, I do have something to really show off now. So I applied for it with no hopes. I forgot that I applied for it. And in 2 months, I received an email inviting me for an interview. interview. During the interview, actually, my grandmother got sick, so I was kind of upset and worried. So I kind of wanted to miss the interview.
Yeah.
But again, I was pushed by people who surrounded me, which I'm thankful for. And I was a little nervous during the interview, but I made it. It was, after a week after the interview, they emailed me that I was a semi-finalist of the Fulbright program.
That's good.
So basically, semi-finalist means you are basically a finalist, but, the final decision would be made in the United States here. I would say it's New York or DC, but I might be wrong about that. So basically, if the universities will not accept you here, the Fulbright will be like, sorry, we wanted to fund you, but the universities did not really accept you. So so during this process, it's a very long process. So after you are announced semi-finalist, you pass the tests of TOEFL and GRE. So there might be other tests for other fields, but for me, it was GRE and TOEFL. And after those tests, that's it. It's a silence for 7 to 8 months.
7 to 8 months?
Yes. So those things happen like in November or something, or even in October. I think I finished everything by the end of October, and the results come closer to May. That's when I received the final information. And during this time, you kind of receive emails from the university saying thank you for your application, because the institution that works with Fulbright students applies on behalf of you. They create an email for you and everything. So that's how they apply. I don't know what's the process is. I think it's too complicated. But I used to receive some random emails from like, I don't know, a university from Colorado. And I'm like, what?
I didn't apply there.
Exactly. But in May, I received an email that I was officially admitted to NC State, to the International Studies program.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
And now you're in your second year.
Yeah, I'm actually graduating into very soon. 1.5 months.
Wow.
Whatever. In May, I'm graduating. I'm already closing the program.
Oh my gosh, how does that feel?
Honestly, I can't believe. I think it's just, time passed so quickly, even though it's been 2 years. I didn't realize how quickly the time passed. Honestly, I'm excited at the same time, a little bit scared for the future, because as of now, like, I don't really know what I'm going to do in Georgia because I'm not staying here. But my intuition and my heart is telling me that I should go back and see my family, because I haven't seen them for almost 2 years. And then let's see. I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope everything will be good. I mean, I sacrificed so many things for Fulbright, and I really, really worked hard with my education here. It was still challenging, as a foreigner to receive an education in like a foreign language. And but I think I did a good job. I don't know. You should ask my advisor.
No, I firmly believe you did do a great job. Your record speaks for itself, and I'm confident that even when you go back to Georgia, if you go back to Georgia, you'll do great things.
Yeah, I hope so. But yeah, that is my plan. And honestly, I'm really grateful for the program and for NC State. When I was coming here, I didn't know what NC State was, but it turned out to be a really great university, with the great department, like the faculty members, the professors, everyone is very supportive. And same goes to students, like my classmates, like everyone is just supportive. So yeah. Which is something you don't really expect. Like, there are so many stereotypes generally about the United States that you're like, oh God, how to make friends.
Yeah.
But I think everything worked out really, really well. I had access to resources. If I needed any support and help, I could always ask for it. So,
well, I'm very glad that you made the decision of showing up here, and I'm glad you experienced such wonderful memories, with the professors, with the NC State and the U.S. That's just it's incredible, something to be grateful for.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's it's always important that You have the sense of belonging, and you are not alone. That was the most important thing I was asking for, that I would not feel alone with
Mm-hmm.
my problems, with my thoughts. And yeah, there were times when I was really feeling alone, but if I were to ask for help, I'm sure I would receive a help. And my professors were going beyond academia. They were like, we can talk about personal life, we can talk about anything. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what made it feel like home. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm really happy I can call North Carolina and NC State a home. So
Yeah. Well, that was, thank you for walking me through your journey from the beginning
yeah, it was
to
a
the
lot of
end.
things in there, but
No, that was wonderful. And I really enjoyed this conversation, Goga. Thank you so much for joining me.
I enjoyed it too. And thank you very much for having me and hearing me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.